Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in this webinar of Building Momentum Using Guided Pathways to Redesign the Student Experience. My name is Linda Garcia. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Community College Student Engagement. Since there is a large audience today, all attendees will be muted. And at any time, if you have questions, please submit those in the Q&A pod. And if you have technical difficulties, just type those comments in the chat pod. Today joining me is Lee Goodson. She's the Tulsa Community College president. Her college was part of the Pathways 1.0 with AACC, and she's a board of our National Advisory Board. Also joining me today is Davis Jenkins. He is Senior Research Scholar at the Community College Research Center. He's a leader, an influencer, and a motivator of the Guided Pathways movement, and Davis wrote our foreword for this national report, so we thank him for that. I've asked Lee and Davis to join me today to respond to some of the findings from this national report in regards to Pillar 2, help students get on a path, Pillar 3, help students stay on their path, and Pillar 4, ensure students are learning. And most of all, I want them to talk about how the Guided Pathways framework has helped colleges during the COVID pandemic. But before we begin this panel discussion, I just want to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for funding the development of the Guided Pathways items that were added to the SENSE and SESI surveys. And many folks played a part in finalizing those items, so we thank them too. This report that we're going to talk about today is a first look at whether students are experiencing key elements of Guided Pathways. We understand for students to experience this, college must redesign themselves first, change their day-to-day operations, and we know these changes take time, especially for new policies or practices just to spread throughout their institution. The bottom line is, in our national report, is that we're seeing momentum, especially with those Pathways 1.0 colleges, and the work is nowhere from being done. So to kick off this panel discussion, let's take time to listen to what students say about what Guided Pathways means to them. And I'll be sharing my screen.
Guided pathway means to me a direction that you take in order to take your classes and not get confused or jumbled up and not sure what to do next semester and then be stuck and then have to wait like 2 hours for a counselor. It really gives you that direction so you're not lost. So I feel like it's really helpful and it just guides you into the right direction.
The Guided Pathway is huge in giving that precise calculation of where you're going to graduate. It helps you, keep focus on, how many courses you're taking so you can either take as much as you can handle, or you can slow the pace and spread it out through different semesters and things like that. But I'll be able to graduate this fall with my AS, and I'm really excited because I want to go into my bachelor's. And now that I have a feel of how it works with, my Guided Pathway and scheduling classes, I'm probably going to finish my BS and a lot sooner than I thought I would. So I'm really excited.
Guided pathway means.
So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and go ahead and invite the panelists to join me in this conversation. So Lee and Davis, the world has shifted since Guided Pathways. When we did this report, it was pre-COVID. But now the pandemic has exposed many of the inequities among students at a deep level. And there's now added urgency for colleges to act quickly to help these students to move forward toward their academic goals. So let's start with Lee. Lee, tell us how Guided Pathways has helped Tulsa Community College during this COVID era.
Linda, everybody kind of went behind the scenes, I call it, around, I don't know what it was for all the individual schools that are tuned in today, but we decided around March 13th that it was time to close our buildings and figure out how we were going to handle this pandemic. And at that time, we didn't understand the far-reaching ramifications of it. But what we did know right away is that we needed to try to stay on track. And we needed to make sure that our students could get in touch with their advisor, would have access to their faculty, and our faculty had to pivot very quickly. So the first thing we did is we extended spring break by a full week to give staff and faculty an opportunity to be ready for the students when they were taking online and remote classes. And that was very helpful. We realized right away before we were able to open the buildings that there were huge inequities with the digital divide. And everybody was online, and but not, some students were taking their classes from their smartphone, and we knew that that was inadequate. So we were unable to open our buildings at that point, but we popped up things like Wi-Fi hotspots in the parking lot, which is still not ideal, but it's something, and really started also addressing the digital divide on a community-wide basis. But we know that there was a great disparity in students that had access to the tools they needed to continue their coursework and those that did not. So when we reopened in the summer, at that point we had committed ourselves, regardless of what happens with COVID, I mean, unless it's really a lot more than we realize, we will keep the campuses open with minimal staff so that our students have access to laptops they can check out or desktops in the library, and various other amenities that they can drive to campus for, so that we don't experience those inequities. We also introduced 4 modalities for our classes. Those were traditional online, online live, which is having a class via Zoom like this, blended courses, and then live courses. And all but about 30% of our sections are taught remotely this semester, and it'll be the same next semester. But we have always kept the student experience at the very front of every decision process. And the biggest part of that through a Guided Pathways lens is the equity lens that you have to look through to make sure students have access that they need to all the amenities they need to be able to complete their work.
Thanks, Lee. So let's switch to Davis. Now tell us, Davis, what have you seen in regards to how colleges who are just implementing Guided Pathways, perhaps at scale, how have they positioned themselves to better support students during COVID? And you're muted.
Usually, sometimes it's a good idea to mute me. We've been talking to colleges, had the luxury of talking to folks around the country in many, many states, continuing our research since COVID hit. I got to say, we are just humbled by the way community colleges, large and small, all over the country have reached out to their students, truly showing that they are college of their communities. But the colleges that have implemented key aspects of Pathways are telling us they're just much better off, we're better able to pivot it. We were talking to folks at Alamo Colleges, 90,000 students, 5 colleges in San Antonio. Every student has an advisor in their institute, which is their meta major. Every student has a plan. And every student is sort of and their schedules are dictated by the plan. So they were saying that between the time COVID hit and the end of the term, they were able to make 1 million personal contacts with students from their programs, which is key, from their programs. These are my people. And scheduling for summer and fall wasn't a problem because everyone has their plan, and those plans dictated the schedule. So in that sense, it had the infrastructure. The issues of equity and access to technology, Lee said, we've seen incredible efforts by colleges, urban and rural, to find innovative ways to reach out to students. But in terms of equity, I think the biggest concern I have moving forward is that this is ultimately about getting students in an academic and career community, not just making sure they take the right courses and everything. That's important, but are they networked into a community? And especially for underrepresented students, making those connections often has to be done personally. And we got to, even beyond the technology access issues. We've got to figure out how to do this and make these personal connections, especially with underrepresented students.
Mm. Let's talk about Pillar 2, Davis and Lee. That's Help Students Get on a Path. And, you know, Pathways requires change to so many interconnected systems, and it takes time. It could take several years for the colleges to roll this out. So Lee, let me ask you, Tulsa Community College has been focused on guided pathways for a while. In fact, in the report, we highlighted an example that 71% of TCC students said they know how to change their program, major, or pathways of study if they were interested in doing so. I mean, compared to the institutional average of responders who said yes to this, that was 59%. So there's a difference there. So tell us what TCC has been doing to make sure students know about this process.
Well, Linda, we scaled up our advising model, and ours is actually, Davis cited the Alamo colleges. There's a couple of different colleges that have that model where they're embedded in the schools and have an assigned advisor. So we were able to use that to work with students, refer them to career services, get them in with our career counselors, and help them decide on a major early on. And so we have been essentially cutting in half the number of undecided students every year over time. So that's been just dramatic to make sure students are on a path. Sometimes they're very flexible plans, like liberal arts. If they haven't decided yet and they know they want to transfer, we want to make sure they're taking the classes that we definitely know will transfer to take care of their general education requirements. And they know that if they finish their Associate of Science or Associate of Arts at TCC, that all of their gen eds will be taken care of and will be applied toward degree. So that's something that's really important. But we scaled up the advising system, which was incredibly important during COVID, because that's when students knew who their advisor was. So those advisors had their list of students, like Davis said, that they reached out and contacted personally to help them get through the rest of the semester, to help them register for summer. Our enrollment was actually up for the summer, which we were really pleased with. And while enrollment was slightly down for the fall, not near as much as what we thought it could have been. So we've been very pleased with how we had already scaled up the advising processes through guided pathways. And again, using that equity lens, using the guided pathways lens. So we've been really pleased with that.
That's great to hear, Lee. And so Davis, I'll ask you this as well. In the report, we also highlight some additional data. So for instance, on average, 20% of student responders said yes that a staff member at their college helped them decide a program, major, or pathway of study. There was also a data point that we shared that 44% said staff members talked with them about the types of jobs their program, major, or pathway might lead to. Now, I know earlier this summer, you co-authored a publication titled Unpacking Program Enrollments and Completions with Equity in Mind. Can you tell us why it's just so important to understand student enrollments and completions? You know, how does that impact the conversations we're having with these students? Tell us about that.
So one of the key premises of Pathways is that students aren't finishing community college programs because they're not leading to a valuable outcome. They're not worth the, they don't provide a return in terms of a good job or transfer with junior standing in a major. And so, especially now that students and their families have so much less money even to make ends meet, let alone pay for college, we have to make sure that we're offering students a path to opportunity, either directly into a good job that pays family supporting wages plus benefits, or transfer with junior standing in the student's major, not transfer with 90 credits in, and start in first term sophomore in their major. The equity issue is, so we call those a high opportunity program is one that leads to a good job or transfer in the student's major. Many students are in low opportunity programs, workforce programs, CTE programs that don't lead to good jobs or even provide ladders to good jobs, and in this general gen ed transfer area that don't prepare students to transfer efficiently with a major. And too often we see inequities in representation of those students. So the whole focus of onboarding and career advancement, there's been a lot of great work on that. But again, I want to emphasize what we're finding more and more. And I know this sounds woo-woo from the quant guy, but it's all about relationships. It's all about, and especially now, building from the start, enabling students to meet other students in their field of interest, faculty, and starting when they're in high school in dual enrollment and connecting with people. That's along with the plans and this advising that like Tulsa's implemented, which I agree we're hearing from many colleges that their enrollment may be down a little, but it's mainly starters, students who would have started this fall. Their retention is way up because they have a connection with the institution. But there are many issues of equity, as we've seen. The issue for Pathways is how are we bringing students into our communities of academic and career communities, and are we creating inequities by how we do that, by the assumptions we make, and by setting up false requirements that privilege some students over others. We're seeing really exciting, this is the most exciting work I think in Pathways, and it's blowing all very exciting to me. As you can see by the logo, tell Kay McClinney I had the logo.
We'll give her a report there, Davis.
That's
Please,
right. Or maybe
she's
watching.
Tie, even though I didn't. But asking the question, how come it is our women of color are in CNA programs? How come it is that our African American students aren't in transfer programs in STEM, healthcare, business, biosciences, other high opportunity fields? And yes, these have deep roots, but really starting to have these questions of what it is we do at the college, and then how can we work down in the schools to get rid of the sorting system and really build pathways to opportunity for all students.
So two things, David, just a follow-up. So I love that you mentioned relationships, because during this COVID era,
I knew you would, and I didn't just do it because of Ceci. I swear, I would have liked to say, "Oh, we just brought in MC and we had the plan and blah blah." But we're talking about humans.
That's right. And during COVID, I mean, folks are feeling isolated. And so there's that concern. How do we make sure that we have those relationships with students, that we don't leave them behind?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not just relation with the college, which is important. It's my field, my people. And by the way, that's how I'm going to find out jobs. I'm going to find out from another student, a faculty member, internships. And here's some on-campus projects that can, this is how people are going to get ahead in this crisis area, in their communities, and in the community college. It's got to be in an academic and career community of the sort Tulsa and other colleges are building.
And then the second point that I was going to bring up is I love how CCRC, your team, when you are speaking to colleges, you actually have them look at their data of, by race, ethnicity, where they're feeding these students to. But tell us about, the moment when they really look at their data, their aha moment. What does that look like? Did they even realize that was happening?
No, we've been doing these workshops this summer in which we're looking at these data. There's a tool that John Fink created on our website that lays it out in tree maps and see which program students are in they in high or low opportunities, and then who's in what programs by race, by age, by gender. And recently we were with a college that, not Tulsa, but it's made huge progress like Tulsa in implementing pathways. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe all our men, our Black students are disproportionately in the low opportunity programs. So the answer here, and I think Lee and you were alluding to it, building these pathways, building the maps, having the good advising is a good first step. But the more advantaged students are going to be able to take advantage of it even more. We've been hearing this from colleges that really are focused on equity. You have to aggressively reach out to families, to communities, to schools, to students who don't know about these paths. Once they find out about them and they get on the paths, our research shows they just rocket. So this is we're seeing these ahas even among, and this is the next, I'm trying to say, now that we've built these communities, now that we have the plans and the advising, now we've got to see what reality we've created. And in some cases, we're going to have created more stratification. And what I love about community colleges is that they're saying, this is the time we're going to reach up and not just accept, better completion rates by minority students. We want to see better completion in high opportunity programs.
Well, and I think to Davis's point, there's more than one way to address that issue also. For instance, here in Tulsa, we have an early childhood education program, and we know that with an Associate of Science in early childhood education, it's not a family sustaining wage. We also have a relationship with one of the local philanthropists, and they have what's called a Bridging the Gap scholarship, so that those students can transfer to the University of Oklahoma and complete a bachelor's degree, and then they're approaching a family sustaining wage. And so at a minimum, we owe these students a full awareness of what they're walking into. It's possible that what they're going into is a second income for a family or something they really want to do, which is fine. Any student needs to know what they're going into and being fully informed. And that requires the career counseling, the mandatory advising. It's all, your whole community is an ecosystem for our students.
Absolutely. And while I'm hearing both of you speak, I'm reminded of two students in our focus group work. One student said, "My life is in your hands. I am depending on you. I'm depending on the advisor, the faculty person. I need that guidance." The second one that I was reminded of is came from our Achievement to Aspirations work years ago. And this student said, "This is the only place that said yes to me. Yes, you can get an education. Yes, you can learn leadership skills." So absolutely, students are relying on us to help them get to their goals. I mean, they're bringing hopes, aspirations, dreams with them. And so they're relying on us to help them.
And they're especially relying on us to do that now, given what's happened with our economy and COVID. And so we have to redesign our services and how we interface with students. Now, really what's happened for us is we have an even more robust system to meet with students, because you can, sometimes a student will be on 2 different campuses during their schedule over the course of a week, but now you can meet with the same counselor, the academic advisor every time, because you can sit down at a Zoom desk in the advising center and meet with your advisor that may be on another campus. And so we've become even more accessible through COVID, and never let a good crisis go to waste. So I feel like we've accomplished a number of years of Guided Pathways work in the last 4 or 5 months.
You ain't retiring though. You can't retire. We decree it. Linda and I will come hunt you down.
I cannot retire. That is right. I've got 2 kids in college myself, and I'm not old enough.
Hopefully they stay there.
That's right. There's so much more work to be done.
There's a lot of work.
But let's go ahead and move on to pillar 3, help students get on the path. Now, advising, it continues to be important throughout the whole student experience. Advisors, they support students by helping them track their progress, stay on track, and especially if students want to change those plans. But I want to show you a couple of videos of what a student and advisor have to say about this. And I'll go ahead and again, share my screen so we can listen to them. And here we go.
When you, especially when you have holds and whatnot, and like the constant like, hey, talk to your advisor to make sure that you need this class. Like, it is like, as frustrating as it is at times, it is almost reassuring, because you know that you're not going to be one of those people who took like 12 elective credits that you didn't need, because they will stop you.
The computer program that we utilize to track a student's progress is the exact same platform that a student can then log into themselves to view their own progress. They can see a timeline view, is what we call it, so semester by semester, based on discussions with my navigator, based on my pathway, these are the specific courses that I'll be taking every semester. Of course, it is adjustable if a student prefers to be a part-time student, prefers to isolate a course one by one, or prefers to take more than what a pathway may recommend. It's just specific to the student, but the student is also able to alter that plan so that we may then approve their adjustments, or they're able to communicate with us as navigators through that platform, but they're able to track their own progress in more of a degree audit type of way, as well as that's the area where they are comfortable registering through as well.
So in our report, the institutional average of students who said they reviewed progress on their academic plan each time with an advisor was 59%. Now, Davis, what message do you share with colleges to move this needle?
You shouldn't be taking students' money unless you have every student on a plan after their first term, and you schedule the courses the student needs on the plan. And work with the student to do that. I hope finally we'll get beyond this full-time, part-time issue, which, we and Ceci, you guys have been nice, I've been mean, we've tried everything. Let's get beyond full-time and part-time to on-plan and off-plan. A student may be living at home, younger, no dependents, they're on a 2-year plan to a degree. I'm a single parent, I got, elder care, I got shift work. I'm on a 4-year plan, although when I see the 4-year, I work, let's get some summer terms in, let's get a J term, let's work with my advisor to bring that down to 3 and get me out of poverty. I can't wait to get out of poverty. I can't wait however many years. So let's talk about full-time or on-plan and off-plan, and each student helps develop their plan. And we think students being able to see how far they have to go is really critical to avoiding the kinds of, horror that I've seen from students. I can't afford to take a wrong course, that of the sort that you were referring to, and some of the people on the your video were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Lee, tell us what your campus is doing to help students track their progress.
Well, we talked about advising, of course, and advising is mandatory. You have to meet with your advisor before you're allowed to enroll. And so you have a check at a minimum every semester prior to enrollment. Advisors also have regular check-ins with their students. We also have DegreeWorks, which may have been the software program that the advisor in your focus group was talking about. And students can log into DegreeWorks and see exactly where they stand in terms of how much of their program they have completed and what specific courses they have left. So there's a tool where if we would allow them, they could possibly self-advise, but we won't allow that. And so, so we try to put in a double check, and we want to build that relationship. To Davis's point, it really is all about relationships. Then you bring in the faculty piece, and we also use the software called Starfish, which a lot of people, and these aren't commercials for these softwares. I mean, some of them work great, and you always have to retrofit them to meet your own needs. And we've been successful with these 2 programs so far. And so we use Starfish, which is an early alert program, and faculty have learned to use that, and they will let advisors know when a student needs to kind of be checked on or something like that. And advisors are checking on their students anyway. These advisors have really, over the course of the last 3 years, we've scaled up our numbers, and our training has been exceptional for these advisors. So I think just being really intentional. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that so sometimes people feel like with your transfer programs, you can't keep students on a path as well because it ultimately is up to the university. But we've also started what's called the Tulsa Transfer Project. We have a lot of branches of our public universities here in the Tulsa area, and we are building maps for every single transfer opportunity in the community. And so that is very, very important to be doing that as well. So the maps, the mandatory advising, the degree works, the Starfish, it's a whole package, Linda. It's there's no silver bullet. It's definitely a system that you have to put into place.
Right, different key components to help students move forward.
And then and it's about leadership too. I mean, we have a great team, and really committed to the principles of Pathways and committed to equitable outcomes. And it takes that passion inside the college to make sure we execute appropriately.
So let's move on to the last pillar of Guided Pathways, and that's pillar number 4, and that's ensure students are learning. You know, in the report, we cover students, their participating study groups or tutoring or service learning. And we also highlight just the power of applied learning in the report. And that's all in the report for folks to read. But for our conversation today, there's something else that I want to focus with that pillar. And it's about engaging faculty. Faculty are critical in implementing Guided Pathways. In fact, 55% of faculty responders to what we did said that their college is in the process of implementing Guided Pathways. But what was notable is that within that same group, 36% were not involved in Guided Pathways at their college. 49% felt they needed more professional development about their role in Guided Pathways. But 58% actually believe that it will improve student outcomes. So Davis, let's start with you. You know, I've heard you say many times, it's important to bring faculty into the conversations. What are you seeing with how colleges are engaging their faculty in the Pathways conversations?
So initially, almost all colleges got faculty as well as advisors and others together to map out programs. And you know, and to some extent, some colleges said, well, we're done. The faculty are done with their jobs. We can go down, you know, they've been sequenced. We can get a plan, blah, blah, blah. We're done. We can go down back to teaching our classroom. But back to this idea of creating academic and career communities, faculty have to play roles, and we're seeing the most exciting work where faculty are playing 3 roles in particular. Number 1, helping build this sense of community by helping recruit and onboard new students, being there from the start, meeting with students from your high school, meeting with undecided students, you know, who are already enrolled but don't know. Actually hunting down. I was talking to a college that was looking at some of their nursing students, their information technology was looking at their nursing students, the majority of whom won't get in the nursing program, finding that a lot of them take computer courses. So they're been recruiting students into healthcare information technology programs in their business and computer area. So they're recruiting students. I have to emphasize this. Moving forward, Tulsa Community College, every community college is not going to recruit based on Tulsa Community College. It's going to recruit and retain based on your programs. And we're saying that these relationships, the relationships that matter most within these communities for retention. The second is we lose so many students from the start, and that's because we give them a boring curriculum. In fact, sometimes more than a boring curriculum. Don't get me started on DevEd. But we have to have every student in the first term, including dual enrollment, have the light the fire learning experience, are really well taught that lights their fire for learning. So we're seeing faculty in meta majors develop that light the fire course. It doesn't I mean, in healthcare, you can't necessarily teach you won't be able to teach a nursing course right up, but you could have a killer sociology or psychology course, or you know, something beyond the student success course that lights the fire for learning. And then you mentioned it, anymore to get a job, you not only need a degree, you need experience, but a lot of the experiences and internships, you know, those may be more difficult for our students, especially now to get. We got to build project learning, experiential learning, active learning into every plan, every meta major, every field. And that's really the next frontier, how to do that with a community college with students who don't have a lot of time and resources to do internships, which really require like a rich daddy, you know, to pay for, which most students don't have.
Lee, what about Tulsa? What is your campus doing to engage the faculty? And, what are lessons learned? What would you do over?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, I would say we got into Guided Pathways a year after I arrived. And I would say even during my interview process, I heard of some faculty saying, we need to start making this pivot. Here's some things we need to, and it was just a natural progression. We were part of ATD. And I would say when we started Guided Pathways, maybe a third of the faculty felt this, that something like Guided Pathways or some sort of really intentional work to keep students on the path was needed. I remember I went to a program where Sandy Shugart of Valencia College was making a presentation, and I think it was a small group, and he said, once you get over 50–55%, you've reached your tipping point. And so then culturally, you've started to shift if you can hang on to that. So what's really important to faculty, because if you think about who a faculty person is, they're a very educated person. Many of them are scientists or people that believe in logic, and just from a paradigm of a faculty member, the why is the most important thing. Why are we doing this? And so, but it's not just faculty, it's staff also. It's really the whole college. And as faculty go, so does the college go, really. Faculty are the heart and soul of any college or university. I mean, they are the ones delivering what we offer to students. So the why to get to your critical mass is very important. And then once you get to your critical mass, then the faculty start changing their own culture within themselves. And so what we did is, through the Pathways Project, we had these convenings, and Davis was at every one of them, as was I. And we would make sure we were allowed to bring about 7 people, a team of 7 people, to each convening. And so we would take 2 faculty members, more if we had room, to every convening. And then that faculty member would bring it back. Then after we would go to a convening, we would come back, and anybody that had gone to a convening would come to the debrief. So it was a stackable group. The group kept getting bigger as we went through Guided Pathways. We have continued that practice. We're also part of the Strategic Horizons Network. And so anytime we go to SESI or a Pathways convening, if there's some sort of extra Pathways convening that we're allowed to come to, or we go to Strategic Horizons or something along those lines, we make sure that we are taking 2 or 3 faculty members with us, and generally not the same faculty members. And so we really work with that. The other thing we did is we have dramatically increased how much professional development we are offering to both staff and faculty. And the faculty have a great deal of input into the professional development. It's squarely focused on learning outcomes and equitable outcomes in the classroom. We also have had an incredible amount of programming on the academic side for equitable outcomes in the classroom through our DE&I program. We offer every year, through the generosity of one of our donors, a culturally responsive pedagogy program with national speakers and educators in that space. We open that up statewide, and we're just staying consistent with your professional development is key. And communicate, and it's still not enough. No matter how much you communicate, it's not enough, so keep doing it.
No, that's great, Lee. I mean, that really matters. And I'm sure folks who are listening today, they may reach out to you because professional development is so important to these faculty. And we learned that.
It is
just
really important. Yeah,
listening
really
to these
important.
faculty. I know go ahead.
Well, one thing I failed to mention was you also have to be committed to shared leadership. So, the shared governance or leadership process in higher ed is something you absolutely have to be committed to. So it's, I've met some of my counterparts at the university level that may have been in the corporate world before they came to higher ed. And sometimes that shared leadership process feels slow, but it absolutely works. And it makes you think about the why, and it lets everybody else understand the why behind it. And it's really about the student experience and the student outcomes and getting our students to a sustainable wage.
Absolutely. So I know we have some questions from our viewers, and I'm going to ask my colleague, Dr. Fullner and Terry, to share some of those questions, and take it away, Coral.
Thank you, Linda. So early on, y'all talked about COVID and what Pathways is like in the COVID area. So we received some questions about COVID and advising. One was from Rebecca Butler. She asked, how do you scale up advising? So many colleges have a hiring freeze preventing adequate advising. So if you could talk about how to scale up advising during a hiring freeze. And then another person had a question about advising using Zoom.
Okay, so Davis, you want me to answer that? Go ahead. Go either way.
No, you.
You. Okay. So we are on I wouldn't call it a hard freeze, but we're not hiring right now. And in fact, when we scaled up advising, we repurposed lots of positions within the college. So we had layoffs, and then we added the advising positions. In this environment, if we have an advising vacancy, we will probably ask someone in a different department to fill that rather than keep that department whole, just because advising in this environment is so critical. We have scaled up a fully functional entire Zoom operation with advising. You can get all online. You can get your appointment. You can keep your appointment. You can meet with your advisor. You can meet with the same advisor every time. The advisors are on Zoom all day. I'm sure they're working hard. I'm sure they've got Zoom exhaustion, and we'll use that tool after COVID is over. So I think next fall we'll still be using that tool, and we actually are able to have more student contact with it. Even on campus, our students that don't have their own computer or their own laptop, or weren't able to check one out because perhaps we ran out, they can go onto campus because we're open. They check in at the desk. There's a plexiglass up. Everybody has a mask on, and they go over to a little room, and their advisor pops up on the screen because of some sort of trick that the receptionist person did. And so their advisor pops up on that screen, and they meet with their advisor on campus, but their advisor isn't on campus, or their advisor is in another office. So I was completely amazed at how fast our advising department scaled up that operation, and just really impressed.
Guided Pathways is a strategy for providing advising focused on helping students explore, choose, get into programs in institutions that should have more resources because of what you do for our society, but because you serve the poorest students, have the least resources. And the idea is to build these structures, these communities, have students on plans, do online advising, but all of which is helpful and creates efficiencies. But the key thing is to involve everyone as advisors. Faculty are advisors and counselors, and I know some places counselors are faculty. Everyone's advising, but doing it in these meta majors. We're increasingly see colleges use, which I love community colleges, but one critique I've had is that you don't take advantage of your students and your alumni enough, your more experienced students. They're there at orientation in a program, not just, welcome to Tulsa Community College, but, I'm in the criminal justice program, and I'm going to tell you what's what, who are the good teachers, what you got to take, what are the hard courses, and I'm planning on transferring because, just with an associate degree, I'm not going to be able to get as good a job. And by the way, here's how the local, police are sponsoring this kind of program. This is how you find out. This is how our people who have means and education, we network. our students don't have in their families often social capital to create that kind of networking that's going to move them ahead professionally and educationally. That's what we're creating in Guided Pathways. These technical improvements are helpful, but it's the community that's going to engage students and get them through. Everyone's responsibility, counselors, advisors, faculty, whatever, their responsibility is to help students, on this path.
Okay. We received a question from Christy Ponce. Her question is, could you provide any advice on how to best help students create financial plans at the front end when they set up academic plans?
We're seeing more and more examples of this. If you have an academic plan, you can easily create a financial plan that goes with it. I was talking to folks at Jackson College, and they're creating a parallel to their in Michigan financial plan, and that's what that's what matters. It's not so much that your community colleges are inexpensive to go take courses. You want to know what's the cost of my degree, and how long is it going to take. And even if you don't have it automated, you can give counselors rules of thumb, and students want to know that. They deserve to know that. I mean, they're spending, thousands of dollars. The average tuition and fees nationally, if you take out California, is $4,700. That's average. And that doesn't include books and living expenses. So this is a lot of money, and there is, as Linda was saying, there's a lot at stake. This is our future. So we have to provide a plan, and it has to have a financial element to it. And trust me, your financial aid people love Pathways even more than Lee Goodson does. The financial aid people love the Pathways stuff, and they can help you even without fancy programs or whatever. Give students rules of thumb about how much it's going to cost, not just to get the associate degree or the certificate, but if you, finish your degree here, get junior standing at the local university in your field of interest, how much is the whole package going to cost approximately?
Well, and you bring up a good point, Davis. Financial aid people do love Pathways because the student doesn't burn through unnecessary financial aid eligibility. They're able to allow their eligibility to pay for as much of their education as possible. And I love your idea about having advisors help students with a financial plan right alongside, even if you're just giving students tools. If you don't have capacity right at the front end, that doesn't mean you can't start something. You can always start somewhere.
We just came out with this is a shameless plug. I don't have a SESI background. I don't have a CRC background. We came out with Aspen with a dual enrollment equity playbook in which we looked at partnerships of high schools and community colleges that have equitable outcomes, college outcomes for Black, Latinx, Native American, Pacific Islander students in 3 states. And we use data to select these more equitable outcomes. And one thing these are doing is marketing to families and in low-income communities, community groups, how taking dual enrollment, finishing your lower division in a pre-major at the community college, and then transferring to university, how much you can save and how much you can finance. People they've heard all this stuff about the cost of college. We were talking to people at Palm Beach State working in low-income communities. The folks there, first of all, they hadn't heard of dual enrollment, which is like in Florida, it's like gold, because no one's talking to these families. And second of all, when they hear about it, it can't be free. But working with them and showing how you can save money, even with middle-class families, you can get that same bachelor's degree at a lower cost with good teaching, not big lecture courses, which are now online. Community college faculty dedicated to teaching who are going to engage and make sure your son or daughter takes the courses they need to transfer in their field of interest. And by the way, we have connections with local employers where they can get certificates and other things that help them get jobs. So this is, community colleges are, I know enrollment's down this term. We think it's mainly down amongst adults who decided not to go, and students who I think traditional aid students making a big mistake, taking a gap year. But I think your enrollments are going to rocket back, but you can't just leave it to chance. We got to reach out and build the supply chain anymore.
Right. And Cora, I think we just have time for a couple more questions.
Okay, we have one from Kelly Hogan.
Okay.
Do you have any examples of institutions that clearly lay out the ROI for students as they consider programs and careers? And how are they paying attention to equity in recruitment and outcomes?
So that's again what I was suggesting, that colleges are showing families and dual enrollment students how much you can save. Indian River Community College in Florida, which was one of our sites for the markets, that 97% of their students graduate debt-free, and in programs that will enable them to get bachelor's degree. So, you know, the ROI for community college is, without pathways, honestly, is questionable because of the high dropout rate, because of the high rate of excess credits. But with, I mentioned Alamo colleges, they're dramatically reducing the number of credits that students are taking, and talking to their bond agencies who are telling them that's really going to raise your value, and increasing their bond ratings for you presidents and CFOs out there. So this is all about value, but it's got to be value that you aggressively market and outreach to students who, not from families like ours, who aren't going to just take advantage of a great deal. You've got, but thereby also build a supply of students who wouldn't otherwise come to you or any other college.
I think the other piece is you have to work with your employers in the community also, and make sure that they understand the value of a Tulsa Community College education throughout the region, because they have kids themselves, they have employees that they're talking to, and those people have friends that are on the soccer fields, whatever soccer fields those are, right, or in the schools or at the churches. And so I think you have to be interfacing with your employers so that you know that the learning outcomes your college is achieving, your community college is achieving, is meeting the needs of those employers. If employers don't feel like you're meeting their needs, and a great example of who's tackled this is Brenda Hillier and her team at San Jack. But if employers don't feel like we're meeting their needs, then the ROI, regardless of the cost, even if it was much less, is not an ROI at all.
But this isn't just for CTE programs. This is for all programs. And increasingly, I think we're seeing the emergence of a new kind of an associate degree, because these employers are hiring people right out of university, and they're smart young people, but they don't know how to do nothing. And many of them want high salaries and are going to move. I see community colleges working with employers, including employers that don't typically show up in the labor statistics, like churches and convention centers and others, to create degree programs with experience and skills that will do these good jobs, but also retain, and by the way, who the employers can pay to go on and get their bachelor's and master's and further education and training, because that's what they're going to do to retain talent that they get from you.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question.
Yes.
Does that sound good, Linda?
Yes.
So several questions about professional development. What kind of professional development opportunities do you offer for faculty as well as non-faculty specifically?
Just a really wide range. I mean, every time I open up an announcement from the college, it's about a professional development opportunity. So we tailor our professional development for the specific employee group that is taking advantage of this opportunity within the college. It could be some sort of national type of training. We do a lot of, we have the Covey package within Tulsa Community College, and we use that for a lot of our leadership and supervisory training. And then on the faculty side, which they have access to some of that Covey work, especially if they're a faculty chair or a dean. And on the faculty side, it's all about engaged learning. We have a program where it's the Design Institute, and a faculty member will take a week and they will get a small stipend for taking that extra week. They'll stay after finals, or they'll come in before the semester starts in January, and they will completely redesign their course for the purposes of equity and increased learning outcomes across the board. And so that's just one example. A lot of our professional development is designed and developed internally, and then we pull from national opportunities as well. Now with COVID, there's a lot of professional development opportunities delivered via Zoom, and as we can see right here today. And so we really just support it. We fund it. Our philanthropists fund it. And it's just, there is not a shortage. And if there is, and we find out about it, we try to implement it. So I don't think that was very specific, but I hope you got the idea of how we lead this college in a way saying that we are all learners.
That's great, Lee. Thank you so much,
Lee
Davis.
alluded to it, but what we're saying is, usually we think of professional development as individual professional development, but I know Tulsa and other colleges are looking at more strategic organizational, bringing together faculty, staff, others to redesign not just your courses, but your communities, your programs, and providing just-in-time faculty or professional development to support those efforts. We're seeing as some of the most rich learning experiences, and they're coming up with stuff like we never would dreamed of, held accountable, but also provided with training and other support to redesign the community college so it serves both upward mobility and workforce and economic development for their communities. It's a great time to be a community college educator, especially if you don't need sleep.
That's right, it sure
Exactly. If you don't need sleep, you should be in the biz.
That's right. Sleep is overrated.
Yeah.
So we have concluded our time. So let me just wrap up. And Davis and Lee, do you have any final remarks that you want to share with our participants today, or any advice or guidance?
The kinds of questions that CESI asked for its study, every college should be asking to see if the guided pathways or any of your reforms are working, because unless students perceive that they're, and their experience is different, and unless faculty and advisors experience with students and with each other is different, it's all nice in theory on paper, but it ain't going to have the effects that we want.
So I'm going to give my Davis thumbs up. I'm doing you. All right, Lee, what about you?
I would just say it's incremental progress. It does not happen overnight, and you have to be patient. It's very long work. And I will say, I was on the phone. I'm an Aspen Fellow, and we've been on the phone with our colleagues across the country. And when COVID hit, we were like, it was like having a bucket of ice water poured over our head, because we've been doing all of this really hard work for a long time now. What feels like a long time. It's been 6 years for me. And that's, relatively speaking, not that long. And to completely change how you do business. So it's long work. You'll see incremental progress. You have never arrived, and you just have to be patient with both yourself and your team and your college community. And it's really rewarding. So I highly recommend it if you haven't taken it on already.
Well, great advice, Lee and Davis. And I just want to let the viewers know that on October 13th, so shortly, we're going to release a playbook on Pillar 4, Ensure Students Are Learning. Again, that is funded through the Gates Foundation. And we dug in deep, and we're going to have narratives and videos, and we're going to have equity tools that you can use at your campuses. So come to our website on October 13th. It's Pillar 4, Ensure Students Are Learning. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We have recorded the session. We will send an email out to all those who registered, and especially those who could not make it today. But Davis, Lee, thank you so much for joining us, telling your story, what you're seeing with other campuses, and especially what you're doing at Tulsa Community College. So we're going to conclude our time together. And Davis and Lee, just so you know, so when we conclude, we will all be out of this Zoom. And so I will follow up with an email too. So just to let you know, it'll just shut down.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Thank you, Ceci, for
All right,
giving voice
thank
to
you.
students.